Hi, and welcome to High Growth with HTDC on ThinkTech Live Network series. I'm your host, Cindy Matsuki. For those of you who don't know, HTDC is the High Technology Development Corporation. We're a state agency that supports technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, and manufacturing. So we hope to showcase all of those things during this show. First off, I'd like to make some announcements before we meet our first wonderful guest. So, Blue Startups, which is the accelerator on Oahu, is accepting applications for their next cohort. This will be their third cohort. The deadline is this Saturday, February 1st, so sign up soon. Check out bluestartups.com. Wetware Wednesday is our social networking event for software developers, and that's tomorrow, the 29th, at The Fix. It'll be sponsored by Arsenal Venture Partners, and we'll be hearing some pitches, so I hope to see you there. Startup Weekend is next week, from February 7th through the 9th. So bring your ideas and find your partners. Also, to put on your calendar, March 5th is Entrepreneurs Day at the State Capitol. Please stop by the Capitol to show your support for Hawaii's entrepreneurs and meet your legislators. If you'd like a table for the event, please email us at events@htdc.org. And this is a shout out to all the SBIR Phase 1 winners. HTDC offers the state's matching grant and will give you funds for up to 50% of your Phase 1 award, which is a nice segue into our first guest. My guest is Dr. Rex Jokobovitz, founder of Experiad Solutions, which is his second company, and he recently launched this last year. And he's kicked it off with an NIH SBIR grant. So I have great news for you. I'd like to congratulate you on your Phase 1 win and present you with the state's matching grant check.
Oh, right on.
Yay!
Thank you so much. This is going to help a lot.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Good job.
Yeah, I was lucky. I called HTDC just about a month ago, wanting to see if there were other SBIR recipients in Honolulu that I could network with, and they mentioned to me that there was a possibility of a matching fund, so it's
Great.
amazing. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, great. That's good.
Yeah.
So maybe start off with explaining what is Experiad.
So Experiad, we're a very early stage startup right now. We've actually been in operation for about 6 months, and we are building software for behavioral therapy groups that treat autism. And our software will help them manage their data, get rid of their paperwork flow, and more easily create custom curriculums for each of their students, following models that are being researched at universities right now, showing that certain types of therapy works better than others if you adhere to a certain model. So our software is going to make it easier for the director of the group of therapists to coordinate and manage the adherence to these new models that are coming out, making the therapy more effective.
Wow. So where are you in the process?
Well, we are in the early stages of building the software, and all along the way we're going to be getting feedback from therapy groups that are going to be our intended customers.
That's great.
We are recipient of a Phase 1 SBIR, which, lucky for us, was a very large Phase 1. And so that's allowing us to do the expensive work of laying the groundwork and having the software developer work on this. Probably for the next year and a half, we'll be building this Phase 1 version and testing its feasibility, and then hopefully getting Phase 2.
Wow. That's great. You should come to Wetware Wednesday. Find some
Yes.
more software developers.
Plan on it. Yes. Absolutely.
Good. You had mentioned that you were from Hawaii?
Yes.
Were you born and raised?
I was raised here since I was 2 years old.
Okay.
Lived in Ainahaina, and then ended up going to Kalani High School, graduating '86, and then UH for a couple years, and then finally went off to the mainland for what I thought was going to be 2 years. And
Wow.
I think, like a lot of people who leave Hawaii for college, I ended up being gone a lot longer than I thought. Led to grad school, and then started a business and built my company, sold my company, got married, had a couple babies.
Wow.
Finally, after 23 years on the mainland, I began the next chapter of my life. 2 years ago, I moved back home, and it's so good to be back.
Wow.
It was an amazing journey, but all along the way, every year I said, okay, next year I'm moving home. So if there's a lot of kama'aina out there on the mainland hoping to be able to come back to Hawaii, I say do it. It just feels good, and you know, it doesn't make sense to compromise the most important things in your life. You need to come home and make it work here.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So basically, you just wanted to come home.
Yeah, family, friends, lifestyle, swimming in the ocean, you know, all the things that make living in Hawaii so great. It's like I felt it every year. And Seattle is a great place too, and it actually was a really great place to start my first business. But now that I've got that experience and I've got some capital, this is definitely the place to put down the roots for the rest of my life.
So tell us about your first company that you launched.
So that company was called Vivalog, and I was still a graduate student at the University of Washington, and I watched the dot-com boom come and go. I saw a lot of my colleagues start companies or join companies and become very successful. But when I finished my dissertation, it was kind of like the end of the bubble. So that's when I was able to get my first SBIR grant and start my business. And actually at the contraction phase is a good time to start a company. A lot of successful companies were started at that time because first of all, it's easier to get talent. You know, you're not competing with a million other startups, and you're not being drawn down this unrealistic path. It's much more realistic, and you're looking more long term. How am I going to become profitable? So I was very lucky to get my first SBIR and several more after that.
Wow.
Totaling about $2 million, which was enough to get my company to the point where we were profitable. We had software that we sold to hospitals. Anywhere from $30,000 to some of the larger hospitals would pay several $100,000 for it. And it caught the attention of some of the big hospital information system vendors. And we got acquired by McKesson Corporation in 2008, about 3 months before the economic meltdown happened. So very good timing for me.
Timing is key.
Yeah, and I definitely couldn't have done it without the SBIR funds because what we were doing was a small niche that would not have been very exciting for investors at the time. So I think SBIR fills a really important niche there. You know, you've got this spectrum of companies where on one side you have growth startups that are promising to make $100 million, and they attract the venture capitalists. And then all the way on the other side you have a lifestyle business, a mom and pop shop where you're hopefully going to be able to make enough money to live on, and maybe your kids will inherit the business, but pretty much you know, it's not an investor type of business. But somewhere in between there's this gray area where SBIRs really help. You're doing something that's highly risky, not necessarily has a huge payoff at the end, but it's still a startup where you know you need capital and you need to you know, grow a business, and where SBIRs come really handy is in that stage when you're developing something and testing its feasibility, and ultimately it takes you to the point of commercialization. And
so did you get up to a phase 3, or how far along the SBIR?
My SBIRs came from NIH, and NIH doesn't really have a phase 3. I think other large agencies like Department of Defense have a phase 3, which means in defense, you get your grant to build something that ultimately the Department of Defense is going to buy from you. With NIH, it's different. You're building something that you're going to try to sell to hospitals or you know, some other private sector is going to become your customer. And so you know, I got a phase 1 and a phase 2 and then another fast track on top of that, and that was over a period of about 7 years. At the time we sold the company, it was me and 5 engineers and my right-hand man who sort of wore all the hats. And the 7 of us were operating out of my garage, but we already had about 30 hospital customers, and none of our customers knew that we were running out of my garage at the time. But
that's amazing.
we had about $1 million in customer sales revenue and sold the business. And the nice thing about the SBIR funding is that it's not a loan, so you don't have to pay it back, and you don't have to give up any equity.
And you don't give up any IP either.
That's right. You don't give up your IP, although you do give a license to the federal government to use your IP in the case that they really needed it. Like, for example, if you come up with a vaccine for some superbug and they're going to appropriate your intellectual property to save the country, but that almost never happens. So it is a really great way to go. It comes with a lot of caveats, though. It's not easy to get. There's a lot of competition for those grants, and there's also the issue that you probably need someone who's a PhD on your team to be the principal investigator, because you're being judged by a bunch of PhDs who are going to look at your principal investigator and say, oh, how much experience do they have in research? So you at least have to be collaborating closely with a research organization if you're not a research organization yourself. And the biggest drawback, I think, is the delay from the time you apply to the time you would get the money. Typically, there's at least 6 months before you find out your score, and then another 3 months after that before you would actually see the money. And so it's best for a company that's already got a business going, and you're kind of planting the seeds, hoping for some extra capital down the road, but you're not counting on it. In my case, we were counting on it, so we got very lucky that I was able to get each grant on the first try. Usually what happens is you'll probably get a score that's pretty good but not enough to get funded, but you have your reviewers' comments, and then you can resubmit it, and when you resubmit it, you have a much higher chance of getting funded because you're able to write an introduction with your explanation addressing all the concerns, and the reviewers are a lot more sympathetic at that point because they know this is your last shot. You can only submit a grant twice. At least that's how it works in NIH. I ended up becoming a NIH reviewer, so several times a year I'll go to Washington, D.C. and sit down with a group of 20 or 30 other entrepreneurs or PhDs, and we'll review 100 grants. And by doing that, I'm able to really understand what works and what doesn't in a proposal.
How did you become a reviewer?
I wrote a letter to the reviewer panel. I talked to my program official at NIH, and they're really looking for reviewers. So it's not, I don't think it's that hard to become a reviewer but you have to have some experience that would qualify you. But it's a great way to go if you ever want to understand what it takes to write a good grant.
Definitely.
Part of the difficulty with SBIR is there is really a formula to making the reviewers happy, and you have to figure out what that formula is. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of companies that have figured out how to get SBIR, and they become what I call SBIR puppy mill, because they're just getting 3 or 4 SBIRs a year every year, and they've been doing it for 20 years. And at any given time, they've got 10 submissions going. And those types of companies I think they're draining the funds, because the goal of SBIR, which was started in the 1980s, is to ultimately create a self-sustaining business, taking a small percentage of the budget of National Institute of Health and Department of Defense and other large agencies, and taking it away from the large research institutions like the universities, and instead giving that small percent to small businesses, which are ultimately the biggest generator of jobs for our economy. And the goal being that it would generate some success, some economic growth. So if you have companies that are always getting SBIRs for 10 years, that's not quite the goal of the program. So hopefully there'll be more regulations coming out restricting how many SBIRs a company is allowed to have, or making it harder to get one if you already got 10. And then more of that money will be available to those companies that maybe haven't figured out the formula yet, but at least they're trying. And one of the great things about the SBIR is that you don't have to say you're going to make $100 million all you got to do is convince the reviewers that there's some chance that you're going to break even at some point and become self-sufficient. That's enough to convince the reviewers that you've met the commercialization requirements. And so it's much more modest in terms of what your trajectory needs to be.
What kind of advice do you have for companies like that who have been doing just SBIR but haven't been able to commercialize?
Well, as long as they're able to keep going, I mean, I can't tell them to stop submitting SBIRs, but I know what I did with Vivalog was,
how did you...
at one point I realized I only have so much energy. I can put it into sales, or I can put it into writing my next grant, and I chose to just basically go for the sales, and it meant I found myself going towards a cliff, we no longer have that supplemental $400,000 a year that we had before, but it gave me the energy and the fire that I needed to.
It's kind of kicking the pants to sell.
Make it happen. So I would say, if you're really serious about commercialization, you need to make that your priority and wean yourself off of the grants. But more importantly, for those companies that are thinking about trying to get SBIR funds, I think that you should just keep trying. And really, a couple of things that really would make a difference is if you think about from the reviewer's perspective, they need to see that you have some measurable goals, and that maybe you're using some statistical methods to prove that what you're doing works. And that's not, doesn't come naturally to entrepreneur to think about things in terms of a scientific experiment. But really that's what your SBIR is. You're proposing a scientific experiment. A lot of the reviewers might be research scientists. So if you think along those mindsets, you might have a better chance of success. And
that's a good tip.
Yeah, I think that keep in mind that there's a very high likelihood that you're going to have to resubmit. Take the reviewers' comments very seriously.
Okay.
It's very difficult because your research plan is only 6 pages long, and it's really hard to fit in your significance and your approach in enough detail. So you have to be very careful about what you say and what you don't say. Every word matters.
Wow. That is great advice. So we're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
We'll be right back. So this is High Growth with HTDC, and I'm your host, Cindy Matsuki, and I'm speaking with Dr. Rex Jokobovitz, founder of Experiad Solutions.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Hi, welcome back to High Growth with HTDC. I'm your host, Cindy Matsuki, and my guest today is Dr. Rex Jokobovitz, founder of Experiad Solutions. And we're talking about SBIR grants and how to win them, some tricks of the trade. And you're an NIH reviewer, so you have a lot of really good tips. What are some common pitfalls to avoid?
Pitfalls for SBIR. Well, one thing I've noticed as a reviewer is if you're too vague about what you're going to do, that'll sink you every time. You need to be very, very specific about what you're going to do. And once you get the money, you have a lot of flexibility about what you end up doing. So you really need to think about your grant as your proposal as being a work that you're presenting to try to maximize your chance of getting funded. So you have to really think about coming up with something that is succinct and easy for the reviewer to remember, because oftentimes a reviewer has like 10 grants that they have to read over a period of a couple weeks, and then you're in a room where you're looking at 100 grants. So unless your proposal just jumps out with something very succinct and clear and elegant, it's likely to lose some of its luster. And I think not being specific enough is the biggest thing I see. Another thing I see is companies sometimes say they're going to do too much. It becomes unbelievable, especially if it's a fast track or a phase 2 proposal where you have a commercialization plan. Just remember, you're not pitching to a VC. Don't say you're going to make $100 million, because the reviewers are going to just shake their heads and say you're just unrealistic. I think those are some pitfalls that you should try to avoid.
What is fast track? What is that?
Fast track SBIR is a little used proposal method, which is where instead of getting a phase 1, completing your phase 1, submitting your phase 2, waiting for a second review to happen, you submit it all at once.
Oh.
And so you write your phase 1 and your phase 2 as one grant. You have to have very clear milestones of what you're going to measure in between the two phases. You also should have some preliminary results in that situation. You can't be sort of starting from scratch. You got to be able to point to something and say, here's what we've done so far, just to give the reviewers confidence that you're not just blowing smoke. And so there's a more scrutiny when you're trying to get a fast track. But I really like fast track because you're not going through 2 review cycles. The real money comes in phase 2. Typically a phase 1 might be about $150,000, and a phase 2 might be $750,000 or $1 million. Or you can go for these extended budget program announcements like mine. The phase 1 budget was guidelines was $750,000, and phase 2 is like 1.5 or 1.8 million or something like that. So if you can find those, then it makes sense to maybe go for phase 1. But going through all that work to get 150,000, and then having to wait possibly over a year to get the next phase, there's that chasm in the middle. What are you going to do? And so that's why fast track is something to consider. But it's a lot more difficult to write one. I think for first-time grant writers, they should go for just the phase 1. Probably.
So is that something that's up to the grant writer, or is it something that the grantee will suggest you should fast track?
You can choose, but the grant, it's your choice as the principal investigator what you submit. But it's always important to figure out who's the federal program official who's in charge of SBIR at your institute. So in my case, my grant went to the National Institute of Mental Health. There was an SBIR program official for that institute who I developed a relationship with, and she was able to guide me about which of the program announcements I should be going after, and I told her what I was going to propose, and she said whether or not she felt that it was core to her mission. The way the grants work is you submit your proposal, it goes to this peer review group, and then you get a score, which you've got your primary reviewers that suggest what the score should be, and everybody votes. Then that numeric score either is below a cutoff where you have no chance, or it's like awesome where you're almost guaranteed to be funding, but most likely it's in this gray area. The gray area is where the program official has some leeway about which ones you choose. So she could actually pick a grant that got a poorer score than another grant and choose to fund the one with the poorer score because she feels it has a higher chance of meeting the goals of her institute. And so that's where the program official relationship is very important. So if you were going to submit a fast track, you should definitely talk to your program official and get their input as to whether or not she thinks that's appropriate, whether or not she's planning on funding fast tracks that year. So that's very important to understand. It's a two-stage process.
And do you do a lot of like face-to-face time, or is it mostly phone, or do you think it's important to actually go visit?
No, I think that's not that common. Sometimes they will travel to an SBIR conference where you can meet them. You'll be lucky if your particular program official is at a conference. I think one came to Hawaii a few months ago that HTDC was hosting.
SBIR conference.
Yeah. And each state has its own incentives to try to encourage entrepreneurs in that state to go after SBIR dollars, because you're getting federal dollars coming into the state creating jobs. So Hawaii, I think, is at the head of the pack by carving out this set aside. So you get a phase 1, you have the chance of getting this 50%, up to 50% matching budget, which actually really helps because one difference between Hawaii and Seattle, for example, is there's like more taxes that you pay here in Hawaii, the general excise tax, which they don't have in Seattle. And so when I was looking at the taxes, I was like, oh no, it's harder, but it gets offset by this type of thing. And also, one good thing about Hawaii is the salaries tend to be a little bit lower here, especially compared to a place like Seattle or other high-tech hubs. You can operate on a leaner budget because people are willing to work for lower salaries here because there's a lack of that type of job here. And if you find the right person, you'll have an eagerness to see success because there's an appreciation for this type of job in Hawaii. I think what I'm sensing right now is that we're at the very beginning of a wave of high-tech entrepreneurship and growth that's starting here. There's been multiple waves, but I think this one might be more significant. There's the rise of the Pacific Rim economies. All of that energy is flowing in here, and so I'm very happy with the environment so far. And even though we're so small right now, I feel pretty confident that it was the right decision to bring the business here instead of staying in Seattle.
Wow, that's great. I just lost my train of thought. Are there any other good reasons why you came back to Hawaii besides just wanting to bring your family?
Ultimately, I think it's important to try to plant your roots and build something in the place that you want to be your home. So if you grew up in Hawaii and you find yourself on the mainland, if there's any way that you can bring yourself here and make it happen, then everything you do becomes more purposeful when you know this is where you're building your roots. And when you're building a business, it's not just a job. You're creating something which you hope is going to last a long time. It's going to change people's lives. It's going to make a difference for your customers and all of the beneficiaries of whatever product or service that you're building. And hopefully is going to become part of the community where you live. So if you're transplanted and you feel like you're coming home at some point later, you can't really put your roots down the same way than if you feel like you're where you are home. There might be some drawbacks to being here, like my CTO went body surfing at Sandy's and hurt his shoulder, and that kind of cut into productivity a little bit there. So you got to watch out for, you want your people to have fun, but not too much fun.
That sounds good. I remember what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
So how did you get into this field of autism, Experiad?
Well, I was getting my PhD in computer science in the 90s, and I was drawn to a group that was building software for brain researchers, because unlike a lot of the other research that was going on in computer science, this one had a very applied bent to it. I wanted to build tools that people were going to use right away. I didn't want to come up with algorithms that were going to make things faster. I wanted to build something that had users. And so working with the neuroscientists at University of Washington, I developed a lot of relationships in the multidisciplinary area of brain science, which included a lot of psychologists and brain development people who were studying disorders like autism. So I also then, when I got my first grant, it was about brain imaging, and so all of my my grant relationships with NIH were with neuro research funding groups. And so when I left when I sold my previous business, I worked for a while with the company that bought me, and it was time to start again. I felt the itch to become an entrepreneur again. I started looking into areas where I already had my network, and I've always been fascinated by autism. I don't have anyone in my family with autism, but it's always been something that I felt was very interesting to try to understand. So I began dabbling in understanding the research that was going on in that space, started going to the autism research conferences, and I felt there was this amazing community of open-hearted people who were pouring so much of their lives into trying to, make a difference in these kids' lives that I just said, oh, I've got to be in this field. So fortunate to be able to find a niche where I felt like I could add something using the software skills that I had.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a great story.
Yeah, and I think you'll be talking to Emaley after me, and she's actually on the front lines of this, much more experience in the world of autism therapy and what that space is like. I'm sort of just entering it, so I think she can add a lot more to that discussion.
Great. Yeah, we're looking forward to talking to Emaley. But I wanted to thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for all of the insights and tips for all the people looking at SBIRs. And if you want more information about Experiad, please check out experiad.com. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Aloha. I'm Nicole Horry with the Think Tech Commentary. The PUC has established an investigative docket to determine the advisability of an undersea cable connecting the Oahu and Maui electrical grids. It has scheduled public meetings on both Oahu and Maui to invite comments on the proposal. The PUC is investigating whether a transmission cable between the two islands is in the public interest and whether the benefits to ratepayers would exceed the costs of the cable, which DBET estimates would be $700 million. The PUC also wants to know about development risks and how they would be mitigated. With the remarkable increase in PV in the islands and the availability of new grid technologies, it may be possible for each island to generate renewables that meet its own demand and to have separate renewable grids for each island instead. At the same time, an island that depends heavily on a source of renewables, such as PV, may be vulnerable to local changes in the weather or an unanticipated problem with that single method of energy generation. The ultimate question for the PUC, then, is not simply whether an undersea cable is good for Hawaii, but how we can achieve layered redundancy for a resilient statewide system. ThinkTech believes that a great state needs ample power distribution, and that the proper approach is to start with this undersea cable, not only to bring the separate island grids and the state together, but as part of a strategy to achieve the security and safety of redundant systems. I'm Nicole Horry with this ThinkTech Commentary. Mahalo.
Hi, welcome back to High Growth with HTDC on the Think Tech live streaming network series. And I'm here with Emaley McCulloch. She is the founder of ATS, Advanced Training Solutions. And ATS is one of the companies located at the Manoa Innovation Center. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So what is ATS?
ATS is Advanced Training Solutions. It's a company that we started in 2008. It started out as Autism Training Solutions. It was started in response to a need. I'm a behavior analyst and a special education teacher that's been working in the field of autism for about 17 years.
Wow.
And worked in Hawaii for many years at many organizations in the schools, and saw the need of being able to build capacity. Many people might know that autism is growing exponentially. When I first started in the field, it was one child out of 1,000 was diagnosed with autism, and now it's 1 out of 88 children are diagnosed. And there's just a lack of training. There's a lack of people that have experience in the field and that can provide those services that are so needed. And so we really decided to turn towards creating a technology that could build capacity, that could disseminate this treatment that could work for individuals with autism.
Wow, that is amazing. And how did you arrive at this point here with ATS and in Hawaii? And
Yeah, okay. I moved to Hawaii 12 years ago, almost 12 years ago, just right after I got married. And I wanted to just come here and have fun before I had to get, serious and have kids and get a real job. And after I graduated from from college, but
Wow.
just fell in love with Hawaii. And after a year, when we said that we were going to move back to the mainland and then get serious, we stayed. And also I was able to get a great opportunity to start working in the field of autism here, which I had worked on the mainland as well, and saw that there was just a huge need for people that had experience. And so I was immediately put into positions where I was in charge of training a lot of staff. And that's one of the reasons why, again, we started ATS. I was traveling to different islands. I was traveling to Japan.
Wow.
To disseminate this, and we just thought it needs to be online.
Yeah. And it needs to be like self-serve versus you having to go. That is amazing. Do they know why there's such an increase in autism?
No, there's a lot of different theories. A lot of people believe it's just an increase of awareness, and so psychologists and doctors are able to diagnose and identify it more, where before it wasn't identified. It might have been misdiagnosed.
Wow, that is crazy. So Hawaii was kind of just a vacation break.
Yes, and now 12 years later and two kids later and a business.
Nice.
So it's our home.
Great, that's wonderful. What is one of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome with your business?
With ATS? Well, my background is in special education and behavior analysis. I'm a clinician. My whole life, or my whole career, I've been working directly with kids with autism, which I absolutely love. And then starting a business, all of a sudden I have to work with all these adults that are professionals. There were many days where I was like, give me that kid with autism. So I've had to learn new skills. I've had to learn
people skills.
I've had to learn, just business skills and management and I've learned a lot about software and development and way more than I ever wanted to know. But I love it because I feel like I've heard people say this. Actually, I think it was Rex that said this, the person that was on before. He said, I want to be around people that know more than me, that are smarter than me. And I felt like in this position where I am in the business, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm growing a business, and every quarter we're kind of facing new growth questions. I fell out of my element, and I like it because I'm learning and adding to the field.
Wow. So is everything kind of self-taught? You're just learning as you go? Or you're more bringing on people that...
Oh yeah, definitely. I wouldn't be able to do it without my partners, without business people, business minds that I had to pull in. That is definitely something I am glad that I did instead of try and just do it myself. I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you already are selling your service, right?
Yeah, we have over 500 organizations, including university programs, about 50 university programs, like Johns Hopkins University, Western Michigan, University of Texas, to name a few. And then organizations like Easter Seals and hospital like Maxim Healthcare. They'll use our technology to train up their frontline staff and then to meet certain criteria for stakeholders or funders.
That is amazing. And how did you find your customers?
It was just really a lot of networking. We went to conferences, autism research conferences, behavior analysis conferences, and just started talking about what we were doing. We were really the first company to do it. And now there's a few others that are doing it as well, but we're years ahead. And so many people just starting the conversation and many people just saying, wow, this is so needed, and then partnering with them and like getting feedback from them. So when we were building the technology and going through all of our iterations, having people that like organizations that were excited about what we're doing, have them beta test it with us and give us feedback.
That's great. And then they become customers.
Then they move over to customers. Our most loyal customers were the first people that were like, typing in, this doesn't work. And then we fix it.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Holy cow. And then I did want to ask you about a success story. And we have a video. Did you want to?
Well, let me give a little background
Okay.
about the treatment that we train parents and professionals in. There's one treatment that is identified as evidence-based treatment, most effective treatment for individuals with autism, and that's called applied behavior analysis. And it's basically the application of behavioral laws, so reinforcement, shaping, chaining, and being able to apply those behavioral laws to change behavior that would be significant to the individual's life and change their quality of life. So help them access typical peers, or help them be able to strengthen relationships with their family members.
Wow.
And so this treatment, applied behavior analysis, is the only treatment identified by the Surgeon General as best practice. And it's now being covered in 36 states through insurance reform, or companies now are required to provide this and reimburse for this service. And actually today,
Wow.
in Hawaii, they approved Luke's Law, which is a bill that will then eventually require insurance companies to cover ABA for individuals with autism.
Wow.
And
That's
so,
amazing.
Yeah, and so this science of ABA, which basically is requires specialized training, can be taught to individuals that work with them directly, but to parents, to paraprofessionals, to therapists, and then applied usually about 20 to 40 hours a week in early intervention settings. And then there can be significant gains. In a lot of cases, 50% of the children that have early intensive intervention can become indistinguishable from their peers within a few years of the therapy, and go into regular education environments and eventually get jobs and go to college. And so autism is treatable.
Wow.
And this video will give you
That's
a
amazing.
this video is about a boy named Kainoa. He lives in Hawaii. He was diagnosed with autism at age 3 and started ABA, and then it goes through all the way to age 7, and you can see him, what he was like when he was
Progressing.
diagnosed, and then what he was like at age 7.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay, let's watch that video.
Hi, Kainoa. Hi, Kainoa. Hi, Kainoa. What do you want? What do you want? Kainoa. You want what? That's a what?
Please stop. Say hi. No, Kai. Need help with my.
How are you doing? Good. Good. Say good. Yeah. Nice job.
Come on, Luke. Dancing, Luke.
You what?
Yeah.
You love me? A little? A lot? And can I have a kiss? Oh, you're scaring me.
Okay, come on, Eddie.
Where?
To the house.
Okay. Kai. What are you making?
We're making a cake
Wow. For who?
for all the kids.
Whose birthday is it?
My birthday.
How old are you gonna be?
5.
How old?
5.
Let's see your teeth. Well, you're missing 2 teeth.
Daddy wants to look at you. What are you doing? What are you doing? You want to look at balloon?
No.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Can I see? Let's do this in tomorrow.
Okay. Say bye-bye then.
Bye bye.
And
Have a nice trip. Jenny. What is? Good morning, boys and girls.
Good morning, Kai Noah.
No.
You need to have a seat though.
Good morning, boys and girls. Good morning, big girls. Oh no, talk. Good morning. Welcome to my party. There was a squirrel right here at the beach. Can I be your Yeah! And then we went to the trash can again. We ate all the trash. Put it in the trash. Brown, pink, red, blue, red, blue.
Run, Kai, run! Hustle! Stay right there. Good job, Kai. Kai. Good job.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.
How do you say?
Say goodbye. Goodbye.
How do you say thank you in Hawaiian?
Goodbye. Hawaiian.
Say mahalo.
Mahalo. Mahalo. Mahalo.
That was such an amazing video. Like just the transformation that occurred. And that's over a couple years?
Yeah, those 3 years, and actually still know him. He ran for class president last year.
No way.
Yeah.
How old is he now?
10, I believe, 9 or 10.
That is amazing. And he's just fully integrated into regular school.
Yeah.
That's
So I mean, autism
great.
is not always scary, and there's a lot that can be done, and in some cases, a lot of the autism symptoms remain and they stay there. It's a spectrum, but that treatment, applied behavior analysis, has shown to have significant gains in some individuals with autism, and so it needs to be disseminated. They need to
Yeah,
be
that's
able
so
to-
great that this is out there. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's not a magic trick. It's not like something you have to study for years and years. You can learn these techniques. You know, you can be trained in these techniques simply within a few weeks.
Wow, that is amazing. And so you've been growing as a company?
Yes, and it's exciting, but it's also overwhelming. Like today we hosted a webinar and we had over 400 people in the webinar, and it was overwhelming because we were getting calls off the hook. But it's exciting
That
because
is.
people see this need and we're filling this need, and we're excited to continue to find other ways that we can help the organizations that we work with to deliver these services to the best quality possible.
That is amazing. That's such good news. I'm so excited.
Thanks.
Oh, any last words to any new entrepreneurs that you have?
I think that if you have a really good idea and you can find the right people, Just go for it. I know when I first decided or was contemplating just starting ATS, I was so scared. Like I remember talking to my dad on the phone and just shaking, and I met with, investors were angel investors, and so we're really lucky to find a fabulous angel investor who just said, this is a really great idea, let's just do it. I mean, let's go for it, and
awesome.
I think we're going to know within the first year if it's going to work, and luckily it really did. So.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great. Thank you so much for being here, Emaley. And if you want more information about ATS, please visit their site at autismtrainingsolutions.com. That was a great story. And thank you for watching the High Growth Show with HTDC on the ThinkTech Live streaming network. We really appreciate your support of Hawaii's entrepreneurs, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.